Welcome to Monster Party.
Now part of the FANGORIA Podcast Network.
Awesome. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of Monster Party.
Monster Party!
Monster Party!
Oh my gosh.
Wow, you have never been more correct, my friend.
I tell you, my head's about ready to explode.
Mine is already all over the walls.
You know, it is.
Yeah.
Because we've got a great topic and an amazing guest. But who are you?
I am Matt Weinhold.
I am SHAWN SHERIDAN.
I'm Larry STROTHE.
And I'm James GONIS.
And our topic / guest. Yeah, you heard me.
This is big.
This is a biggie. He is an actor, a director, a producer, a writer, a fulfiller of Monster Party dreams.
Yes.
And a master of horror.
A master of horror.
With an amazing, huge amount of knowledge about Hollywood and history and horror and...
And not hard in the eyes. I'm going to say it. I'm just going to say it. Ladies and gentlemen, Tom Holland.
Tom Holland!
Hello.
Oh, man,
Thank you.
Tom.
Thank
Hello
you
out
so
there.
much.
Thrilled to be here.
God,
Thanks
we are
so
Thrilled to have you.
Yeah.
My
Absolutely.
God.
Yeah.
I mean, considering the type of career that you've had and the fact that you have made some of the movies that are like these shining beacons in our lives, I think we can all agree with
Oh,
that.
yeah, totally,
yes.
totally.
From movies like Fright Night to Child's Play.
Oh, there you go.
I mean,
Beast
that
Within,
would be
Psycho
enough.
2.
Yeah.
Psycho 2, one of my favorites, class of 1984.
Thank you.
Oh,
Love
that's right,
that
Matt. You're a big fan of that
I watch
movie.
it like every month. Seriously. Like, I'm crazy for
You
that.
reenact the entire movie.
I based my whole childhood on that, and it kind of went awry sometimes.
Yes.
But with all this amount of work that you've done, I'm not sure if a lot of people know that you started off as an actor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, and I'm just curious how that path kind of, if you could give us just an idea of like how that kind of led you to being this sort of horror impresario.
Well, I've been doing this since the summer of my 16th birthday, which means I started when I was 15. And I got a job at Bucks County Playhouse. And one of you is from Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
John.
In Bucks County, Pennsylvania, I was the apprentice in the theater there, and that introduced me to it. And from there, I learned all about what acting teachers to go to in New York City, and then the following year, I guess I would have been my 17th birthday. I was taking the Long Island Central Railroad into New York to study at what was then called the HB Studio, Herbert Berghoff Studio, which a lot of people studied at. Wow. And I didn't start out to be an actor. I wanted to be a writer.
Really?
When I was really like even in junior high school. Mm-hmm. But then what happened, and this sounds conceited.
I know where this is going.
Yeah. Well,
But people said I was a good-looking guy.
Yeah.
And I should try acting.
Yeah.
And it's once again, it sounds incredibly dumb, but also it was a way to meet girls.
Hey, you don't have to argue with me. I know of what you speak.
And this was at a time when girls were of paramount importance.
Yes. Yeah.
And so,
Why are there bands? Right?
Perfectly true. So I went from that, and I went to Northwestern in the theater school, but I was never really interested in theater. And in those days, everybody put down film.
really?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
It was like the hip thing to do.
Well, because
right?
theater
So,
was
yeah.
like, I've heard.
It's noble,
Yes,
and it's the real acting.
Yeah, just real acting.
Yeah.
Legitimate theater.
Right.
That's right. It was. But I mean, I went out and I couldn't stop myself. I went into the one room that was the Northwestern Film School, and I got hold of a 16-millimeter camera. Oh. And I was 18 or maybe 19.
There's no turning back.
And I went out, well, I'll tell you, these are names now that are gone. But then when I went to New York City, because I only stayed at Northwestern a year, I tried to edit that film with Milton Katsalis. And Milton Katsalis became a famous acting teacher. He's probably been gone for 10 years now. But he held the premier professional acting class in Beverly Hills 20 years ago. I mean, that was
really?
Yeah, that was where all the stars went to, to practice act, to hone their chops.
So you must have rubbed elbows with some notables.
Some of the greats.
Actually, I did. I mean, I started out with, I've got stories, man.
Hey, you know what? Look, we only have 3 hours. So.
I know.
I mean, we still got to get to like Chucky and stuff. But go ahead.
Oh,
please.
we got
Please.
time. We got
no,
time.
Please give us one.
I did a play at the New Dramatists Guild called "The Tiger Wears an Orange Necktie," and there was a little guy in it who was three or 4 inches shorter than I was, bad teeth. Wonderful human being, and even more, a really sensational actor, and much better than I was. And we became friends. And I ended up doing soaps at ABC on West 66th Street, I think. And I ran into this actor in the men's room.
Oh, okay.
And he was wearing like a 1948 suit, and he was delivering packages for money. And I found it just really depressing because this guy had the best use of his body in terms of communicating what he felt of any actor that I ever met. And to cut it short, it was Al Pacino.
No.
Wow.
Delivering boxes.
Wow.
That's
And I was
great.
thinking little person.
Hey, whatever happened to that guy? He
made some noise.
He did a few things there.
Yeah, he did a couple things.
Yeah.
Al was a brilliant actor. I mean, he really was far better than any of the rest of us. He really was.
I mean, you're selling yourself short here. Come on. I've seen you in some stuff.
Not that kind of talent. Al had.
There's a thing that you see. I used to work at this theater in San Francisco called The Curran, and he was doing American Buffalo.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the guy's amazing. Like,
Yeah.
and from the very back of the theater to be riveted into someone who was not even delivering his lines in a way that maybe your standard theater actor would. A lot of this stuff was real method and talking into his lap and that kind of thing, but you couldn't take your eyes off him. You were riveted.
Well, it was his use of his body.
Yes.
If he could communicate with his body. It wasn't really the spoken word. But he was sweet, he was funny, and he was really talented.
But so after you did the soap, right? Yeah.
No, I got a 7-year contract to Warner Brothers.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah.
I guest starred in the last season of 77 Sunset Strip.
That's right. Yes.
And you did the Incredible Hulk. You were in
No,
the
that
Incredible.
That was much later.
That was much later.
But you did do it.
Yes, I did.
But you were in like combat and
I was in combat. I was in Temple Houston, which was Jeffrey Hunter. Christ,
the Young Lawyers.
I was the lead in the Young Lawyers. Zalman King and I. Zalman's now gone.
Oh, yeah, Zalman.
We're
yeah.
fans.
Well, but
Yeah.
I mean, who would ever think? I mean, Zalman ended up making his money doing softcore porn.
That's right, the Red Shoe Diaries.
That's right.
Oh,
Yeah,
my
that's right.
Goodness.
You could not have been a more serious actor than Zalman presented himself, and I was always amazed because he also wrote 9.5 Weeks.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah.
But he didn't really write it. His wife did.
No.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Or did he live it?
You heard it here. You heard it here first, folks,
really.
on Monster Party.
You could not have found a nicer, very Jewish couple than Zalman and his wife. And the last thing you would have thought about would have been any
This story. Right.
bondage was not in the picture.
Right. More like, sit down, eat.
Well, as it got into the 70s now, you started writing, some of your scripts were getting made. I know I'm a big fan of like 70s TV movies. I know you had story credit for one of the Initiation of Sarah,
Initiation
right?
of Sarah,
Kay Lenz, right?
which they've remade.
Right, they did remake it.
Yeah,
Wait, was that the
yeah.
one with? That's the one with the girls.
Kay Lenz,
she-
Shelley Winters,
It's like she has special powers.
kind of like a Carrie,
Kind of like a Carrie.
slightly kind of thing, right?
Well, yes, it was after Carrie. It was derivative of Carrie, and God is the beautiful blonde who was the lead of it.
Well, Morgan Fairchild.
Morgan Fairchild.
Morgan Fairchild.
Who then, was at that moment in time to die for.
Yeah.
I bet.
And that movie caused a furor in Hollywood.
Really?
And was on the cover of the Sunday calendar section because we took and threw a girl, and I don't think it was Morgan, but I could be wrong, into the fountain at the university, and of course she came out in a wet T-shirt.
Yeah.
And you
Golden age of television.
you saw nipples on ABC at prime time.
Oh my gosh.
What's happened in
And
network?
that was 70.
78, I think.
77,
right?
78,
Right.
yes. But it was a cause celeb throughout the country.
Wow.
You know? And what happened was I wrote a script that the bad girls cursed the good girls, and the good girls started to change into barnyard animals.
Well, but that kind of just that happens.
And so I handed this in to ABC, and they had never seen anything like it. And this was just the moment that things like Joe Dante's The Howling were coming out.
Right.
Right.
So they were just starting to do
The
some
animal transformation,
some mechanical in-camera transformation on feature films, but it was way beyond what television could do.
Right.
And so they hired somebody to write me down and to write out the effects and the visual effects sequences,
right.
Really?
so that they
Right.
could produce it and it would be safe.
Right.
You know,
Now, was that one of your first story jobs, though? Like as far as getting a story credit on a produced film?
Yeah. I think I also did the first draft of Something in the Attic, Children in the Attic. What's it called?
Flowers in
Flowers in
the
the
Attic?
Attic.
Flowers in the Attic.
Okay.
all right.
Okay.
So you were interested in writing horror from the beginning?
No. What happened was they were the entry level jobs.
Really? The horror
okay.
stuff was entry
Yeah,
level?
yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, it was. You got to remember, horror has always been the ugly stepchild of Hollywood.
Yeah.
That's true.
I mean, the fact that my own sensitivity to the opinion of my peers is why I ended up shooting Fatal Beauty for my second picture, which is
Whoopi Goldberg.
but it's Sam Elliott. But it's a film that now hardly anybody remembers, and certainly no one asked me about it. But that was my attempt because everybody was telling me after Fright Night that I had to get out of horror. Because if I didn't get out of it, I would be doing it forever.
Typecast.
Here we are. but it was considered déclassé. It was the genre to be ashamed of. One of my dearest friends was a man called Guy Green, and Guy Green cast me in a movie called The Walk in the Spring Rain in 1970. And The Walk in the Spring Rain, I played the juvenile, and I was Anthony Quinn's son, and I got a chance to try to rape Ingrid Bergman.
Wow.
Wow.
Okay,
A chance.
You guys are all knowledgeable enough and old enough to know who those people are.
Oh yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
oh,
yeah.
yeah.
But I bet you could go out and walk down the street and talk to a lot of people under 30, and they wouldn't know who Ingrid was.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that's very sad.
And Ingrid was certainly the biggest star in the world.
Oh, she was
Yes.
huge.
Yeah.
Huge.
In
Just
the
gorgeous.
40s into the 50s, and gorgeous, and a lovely person. Anyway, Guy Green's first film, and you guys may remember this, was a little number, I think, from Hammer called The Snorkel.
Yeah, I love that
That's
movie.
a great little weird
Love
mystery
that
movie.
Oh, yeah.
Now, Guy was forever ashamed of that. And Guy would never mention that. And when it did come up in polite conversation, his wife was embarrassed for him.
Really?
But that was the attitude of Hollywood
Wow.
throughout the 70s towards horror anyway.
And that's more of a thriller. That's more
Yeah.
of a
Yeah, it was like a crime
Yeah.
mystery thriller crime film. Yeah.
but very interesting, very unique plot.
Is that Jimmy Sangster?
It may have been.
It
They did
may
a script,
be, yeah.
script for that.
Maybe,
Yeah.
yeah.
Tom, it's funny that you said though about Initiation of Sarah, how they wrote out these transformation scenes, because the next film I believe you wrote was the opposite end of that.
That's right.
Which was talk about the ultimate 80s monster transformation movie scene, The Beast Within.
That's right.
The
Which is,
Beast Within.
I love The Beast Within. The Beast Within is this
Me too.
great, dark, gritty, grimy, sweaty horror film with like the weirdest and most outrageous transformation scene. And this was like at the time when, like you said, the transformation effects was like a big thing.
It's
Yeah.
it's sandwiched between the Beast Within is sandwiched between The Howling and Werewolf in London.
American Werewolf.
American Wolf London, right?
You
right.
know, and there was wonderful effects work done on the monster in that, Tom Berman.
Oh, yeah.
But I could go on because I'm friends with all these people, so I don't dare say.
Let's call them.
Well, Philippe Mora directed it.
Right.
Philippe Mora is a terrific guy, but Philippe stayed on that. They were pneumatic balloon effects underneath
Yeah.
skin in
Paul,
those.
Paul
days.
Clemens
Yeah.
played
That's
the right.
And
One of our favorites.
Yeah, love
and
it.
Philippe stayed forever on the transformation shots.
It becomes surreal. Like that sequence is insane. Yeah, but it's
but
very
it-
Well, it's like,
entertaining.
if you think about it, though, it's
Everything's
relatively
building.
new. No, but it's relatively new, and I don't blame him really, because if you think about, because it's such a new thing and it's so cool, it's like you want to hang on.
It's
Yeah.
so bizarre.
And throughout that entire movie, you're kind of building to that sequence.
Well,
Yes.
Well, I thought the movie was terrific right up till that sequence. And it was a great cast.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, great
Yeah.
character actors.
Well,
in
that's
the movie.
Sam Peckinpah's stock company.
Yeah,
ended up in the
Yeah.
Beast Within.
L.Q. Jones,
Yeah,
R.G.
yeah,
Armstrong,
yeah.
Don Gordon. Yeah, great cast.
Great cast.
Well, I did an episode of Felony Squad with Don Gordon. I don't know if his credits are in there. That was Howard Duff.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
And Howard Duff was famous for being married to Ida Lupino. But everybody who's listening to this podcast doesn't have a clue who I'm talking about.
Oh, some of our listeners do.
Some
Yeah,
do.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we got
yeah.
some hardcore people out there. Yeah.
I was also a soap opera star.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Awesome.
Which show?
Which soap opera?
Flame in the Wind, The Time for Us, Love is a Many Splendid Thing.
Wow.
Were there monster transformations?
No. But that's how I made my living in the late 60s.
Wow. But did The Beast Within kind of make its mark, though? When that came out, it was a low-budget horror film, but it made a bit of a splash, right?
Well, I think it was a financial success. What happened was the movie got wiped out because it was the last movie that United Artists released, because United Artists was bankrupted by a certain film called Heaven's Gate.
Yes.
At the same time.
That's Cimino.
So that buried the good news of The Beast Within's success.
Yeah.
So, it didn't get all the accolades for having opened and made money that it would have if UA wasn't going through bankruptcy, because the Michael Cimino film.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But did doing that movie create the groundwork that sort of led to
For other scripts?
No, I couldn't get a job for a year.
Really?
Yeah.
After that?
I could. Yeah, and that was a good script, I thought.
Yeah.
Yes,
The
great
original
script.
No, I did it because it wasn't perceived as a success. It put what had been the beginnings of a fruitful writing career on ice.
Yeah.
And then, da-dun-dun-dun,
Yeah.
I got Psycho 2.
How did that happen?
Richard Franklin, who was an Australian,
Yeah.
who directed it, read a spec script that I had done. Now, this is at a moment in time coming off probably one of the most interesting decades in modern film, which was the 70s. Because there was a generational change when Hollywood. You got to remember, I was taken under a 7-year contract. I was signed by Jack Warner personally.
Wow.
So I saw the tail end of the classical studio,
system. That whole,
yeah. Then I saw it fall apart progressively through the 60s, and then my generation came along as directors, and all of it, it really blew open with Easy Rider.
Oh, yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Which I think was 68. I knew Dennis forever, too.
Did you?
Oh, shit, man.
Now, I heard a lot of stories about that film.
We're lucky. Yeah. We're lucky that any of us are alive.
We should talk privately.
Well, Dennis.
Yeah.
Then Dennis, for 5 minutes, became terribly powerful.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And Dennis
Like
could do
carte blanche, you do anything you want, right?
do anything he wanted.
Yeah.
So he went and did the Last Picture Show.
Yeah.
The Last Picture Show.
Or the last movie.
Right.
The last movie.
Last movie. Yeah.
Excuse me, the last movie. The last movie was written by probably the most important writer, mentor in my life, a man named Stuart Stern. Stuart Stern had written a little film called Rebel Without a Cause.
Oh.
I've heard of it.
Come on, you know that film.
Of course.
Yeah, with starring John Dean.
No, James Dean.
Oh, okay.
Idiot.
Anyway, I wanted to direct. And I couldn't get to direct because I was doing commercials. I was working not only in front of the camera, but also behind the camera.
Okay.
I did everything from being a gaffer to being a location manager to directing some of them. But I mean, I really learned a lot about the actual production by doing television commercials in L.A. But that gave me a way to get out of acting, and I got the idea of directing into my head, but I couldn't direct unless I had a script. And that was the moment in time, because of things like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, when the market had opened up to original screenplays.
Right.
Now you starve to death writing original screenplays.
Unless you plan on shooting it yourself on your phone.
Or unless it's off of a best-selling book, or better yet, a series.
Comic book.
Series of books.
Right.
And so I wrote throughout the 70s, and it took me about 5 years, but then I started to sell. And then, then The Beast Within, which I thought was, here I say it again, was, a terrific script. But then Psycho 2 came along.
Wow.
And that really did change my life.
People must have come up to you and go, yeah, so you're writing a sequel to Psycho, huh? Good luck with that. I mean, that must have been like...
How intimidating
that must have been...
I remember.
How did it come about? Like, I can imagine.
Sean, I remember when I heard a preview that they're making Psycho 2, and I remember thinking to myself, "Oh my gosh, this has got to, there's a lot of pressure here."
Yeah.
All of that was true and more. I mean, it was really put a gun in your mouth.
Yeah.
I mean, it seemed like I thought I was going to ruin my career.
Really?
But I was lucky. The director was also afraid it was going to ruin his. So there was a seriousness to the making of that picture, which I don't think I've ever experienced before. And that's a tip of the hat to Richard Franklin, who's no longer with us, because Richard was an Australian who'd gone to USC, and that was the moment in time when Lucas had been like 2 years before him, and Carpenter was in there, and Blue Lagoon. Randall Kleiser.
Oh yeah.
There was a talented group, and Richard ended up being a producer of Blue Lagoon for Randall because they'd been classmates at USC. Anyway, Richard had done Road Games.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
that's an impressive movie. I like that.
And somehow because he was a Hitchcock fanatic, he had gotten the job, and he was reading original screenplays, which they actually did in those days, and fell in love with the script that I had written and had me in, and we talked and we got along. And we both knew that we were critically going to get killed.
Yeah.
But also the movie, it was terrifying and all that, and we worked harder than I've ever worked in anything else. But that movie started out as one of the first cable movies.
Wow.
No,
Really?
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
So Universal wanted to do it as a cable film?
Yes, if you look at the credits, it says produced by Oak Communications, which was a cable company in San Diego.
Oh my God.
I did not know that.
So we were presented with a number of problems. That first, I had to write a script that was strong enough to get Tony.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have Tony. But Richard was willing to bet that if we got Tony, that we could get it changed from being a cable movie into a theatrical release.
Oh.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Now, Universal had no clue there was any want to see on Psycho, or for that matter, any clue that there was a want to see with Tony playing Norman Bates again. I mean, whatever you...
Are you serious?
In their amazing wisdom.
Crazy.
I'm serious. It wasn't until, it was like a dream. We reviewed every film that Hitchcock had ever made, including the silent films. We ran them all, even the ones that nobody remembers. We found them, and we would go down to Universal, and they would screen them for us, because this was also a beat before VHS.
Right.
Yeah.
Cable is just coming in, and the war has just started between Beta and VHS.
Yeah.
And I did everything I could to make sure that script worked off of the given circumstances of the original. And I should also say that Psycho was probably the definitive movie in my youth, because because of Fright Night. I was a Hammer AIP fan.
Sure, as we all are here.
Yeah. But when I saw Psycho, I knew that movies had changed.
Yeah.
Right,
I really did. I knew he'd done montage. And I was like 11, 10, 11, 12, something like that. And I knew that I'd seen something that was the beginning of modern horror for you fans out there.
It's like the horror and the evil is from within. It's not a monster from the outside.
That's right.
That's
No, it's not like
the whole big
not a
change.
Frankenstein or a Wolfman. you
Right,
know?
But to take so many elements, the script, elements of like a slasher movie, and put psychological horror and make it work and elevate it is something that I had never seen before.
Yeah.
And to make Norman somewhat sympathetic, so you'd actually want
There
to
you go.
follow-
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you
That's
go.
the real key to the approach, which
Well,
you could have approached it in any number of ways. And Robert Bloch himself had written a sequel a year or two before, which was almost a satire of the slasher film craze.
Well, I sat in the panel with Robert Bloch after the film came out.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really?
How was that?
Well, he was a very, very nice man, but he was still rather put off by it.
I'll bet.
Right.
He was put off by the violence. Now, I also know that Robert Bloch was one of the mentors of a writer named Stephen King. And Robert Bloch also had to go out every 5 minutes and have a cigarette. and it killed him in the end,
Yeah.
It killed him. I had dinner with Stephen when I was making Langoliers, and we talked about that. Robert Bloch thought it was gratuitous, thought that Psycho 2 was gratuitously violent. But Robert Bloch probably made one of the worst commercial mistakes ever made when he wrote the sequel, the book, because he killed Norman Bates off on page 28. I mean, it made it unusable.
Right.
I mean, so I was faced with having to write an original screenplay. And it wasn't because I wanted to, but that was just the way it was.
Right.
Anyway, what happened was dreams came true. I wrote Norman as you really would have liked to have seen him.
Yeah.
Sympathetic.
Yeah.
Still a victim.
Still a victim. Delicately balanced, but still a victim.
Now, when you showed it to Tony Perkins, did he have suggestions? Did you do several drafts before he was kind of happy with it? Or
Not one.
really?
Wow.
That script was that good. Now, while they were shooting, he asked me to put in the grilled cheese sandwich scene.
Oh, I love that scene.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Otherwise known as the toasted cheese.
Toasted cheese. Yes.
Because Richard Franklin was Australian, and they had toasted cheese with their Campbell's tomato soup,
Yeah.
and not grilled cheese. But anyway, Tony said yes in a big way,
That's great.
but we were still a cable movie.
Wow.
Universal did not have a clue, and then Universal put out a press release saying that Tony Perkins was going to do Norman in a sequel to Psycho, and the world went crazy.
Yeah.
And Universal was literally forced into making a theatrical.
We're maybe there's something here to this side.
We made that direct on the back lot the same way that Hitchcock made the original for 4.8. Now, that's without the studio overhead. With the studio overhead, it came in at 5.2.
Wow.
Really?
That movie was the number 1 movie of the summer of 1982, and my memory is that it grossed worldwide over $95 million.
And that's in keeping with the original Psycho. I think didn't Hitchcock make that whole movie with the budget and crew of his TV show?
That's what he did.
It was like
Right.
a tiny little budget movie.
That's what
right.
and you've never read bad reviews until you read the original reviews of Psycho.
Yeah.
I mean, they castigated him. And he was in despair, and for 5 minutes he thought about closing it down, and then of course he woke up and the lines were around the block.
Yeah. Look who's laughing now.
And then Tony Perkins, I just watched that again recently, and how he almost just walks directly back into that role so seamlessly.
Yeah.
He really is so sympathetic, and you're really, like, from that very first scene, you're just rooting for him all the time.
It's a tragic, sad
It
movie
is.
because he's trying so hard.
He
It's like
is.
he's better now, and then circumstances, that you find out are against him. And but it's a great mystery, and it's a good. It's really well done.
It's a great character arc for an actor
Yeah.
because it's the story of a man who's delicately balanced, trying desperately to hold on to his sanity,
right.
and slowly losing the grip. And everybody's being killed around him. And he's not doing any of it.
That's what's great. But that's the other part of it, too, which is that at the same time you're getting that, you're getting this amazing whodunit.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Going back and forth, who could this possibly be?
Yes, as we keep eliminating everything.
Yeah.
So it couldn't be Meg Tilly because I had a huge crush on
Well,
her. So
she is delightful.
She
Oh, my.
really is. Every
More
time
shower.
Well, that film is very interesting. It seems to me that people forgot about it for about 15, 20 years. And in the last 10 years or so, that's been making it. It's made a huge comeback.
And rightly so.
Yes. Great movie.
Yeah.
But it's come back among film critics. That's what's been interesting. It's not like I get some horror blog calling up to talk about it.
Right.
I get serious film critics.
Really?
Who are writing books and want to include a chapter about Psycho 2.
That's awesome.
That's what infuriates me about some of the original reviews, which is the idea of like, well, it's not Psycho. Well, it can't be Psycho. You can't make Psycho again. You got to do something different with it.
I agree, Matt. I agree.
Which they did. They did.
Yeah, and we know
Psycho,
what went wrong with that.
Less said about that. Everything.
Sean, I don't even want to acknowledge that film
useless
exists.
and pointless.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're talking about the one with Vince Vaughn.
Yes. And which is really just an excuse like, hey, Psycho was a great movie. We'll make it in color for the young people because they don't know anything.
It was so stupid. What a waste.
But yeah, I mean, the idea that this is a new Psycho movie that brings something entirely different, and there are little homages and tributes to some Hitchcock things.
There's some great humor.
It is without a doubt its own thing,
right.
Just a really enjoyable movie.
Yeah,
I agree with you, and thank you. Well, I never worked harder on a script because I was so damn scared. You knew you were going to get killed by the critics for having the temerity, the hubris to even attempt it.
Were you kind of relieved that it was well reviewed in certain company?
Matt, I don't know if you remember in the Bay Area, the reviews was not. It wasn't what it's not Psycho, but it was okay. That was that's what I remember. It had there's a little man who was kind of there's a little levels.
Right.
There's a little man jumping out of a seat applauding, or a little man quiet.
That was the visual review in our paper.
Or there's a guy who's falling asleep, and it was a little man applauding. And I remember seeing that, Matt, and I said, "Oh, I really want to see that. I really want to go." And I went and saw it, and I actually loved it. And of course,
did you get a feeling, Tom, that when you got those reviews, well, they didn't hate it. Whew.
Yeah.
I dodged a bullet.
Maybe that was the worst thing. You were thinking, oh, they're going to hate it, they're going to castrate me. But actually, they didn't.
I knew it was a good movie.
Yeah.
Yes, I've been very proud of that movie. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's beautifully constructed, if I say so myself.
It is.
But it's actor's bait, too.
Yeah.
I had to write a part that would bring Tony back to do it.
Right.
And so that's deliberately constructed with an arc for the actor. Mm-hmm. Because she starts saying it, he goes crazy at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
right.
Which I did not expect that scene. I don't know about you guys.
Know
how that film, where that film went.
You're talking about the last scene?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, Sean. I did not expect it. I thought.
Well, I look when he reaches for the T. Yeah, but
no. And, oh God! It just gives me chills just thinking about that whole shovel.
Yeah, no, it's
blew me away.
But now also the idea that the fact that
that really was a terrific idea. Wasn't it?
You're gonna get a lot of this during the show.
Yeah, sorry.
You're gonna have to just go with it.
I mean, what we did the same thing that Hitchcock did with the original. Mm-hmm. We didn't include the last 3 pages. Mm-hmm. So nobody had the last 3 pages to the day we shot.
Interesting.
That's
so
great.
Nobody knew how it was going to end.
Wow. Oh, that's
including
great.
Tony.
Really?
Yeah.
And do you feel like you maybe have a little step up when it comes to screenwriting, the fact that you came from an acting background, and so you are able to write those arcs in a way that maybe someone who isn't versed in that wouldn't?
It's a good question.
Yes, it's been helpful.
Yeah.
But I got to tell you, it never gets any easier.
Really?
Well, I mean, all you do is you learn more, and the more you learn, the more you try to avoid the mistakes and the cliches, and
right.
And and when you get to know so much, you have such a catalog of film you've seen.
You're more critical on yourself.
Well, you know every cliche.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you say, "Hey,
that's been done."
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, so
Yeah.
I got to say, I've always felt the kudos go to the man staring at the blank page.
I was just about to say that. I was like, there is nothing more frightening than looking at that blank page.
Yeah.
And also, looking at studio mentality, especially, let's say, Universal franchise mentality, 83, I think Jaws 3D came out that same summer. Mm-hmm. And, you're looking at a pretty formulaic way of looking at sequels and franchises, and the Jaws franchise went absolutely nowhere. Whereas, thanks to Psycho 2 and your approach to it, it kept the Norman Bates character and franchise alive, even through today in the Bates Motel.
Even through today, which is
That's
taking
right.
on new life. Yes.
Right. Yeah.
It's handled in a pretty sensitive way, in a thoughtful way, and that's thanks to your approach.
Well, that guy who runs the Bates Motel, who was on Lost, Lindenhoff maybe, I can't remember, but he came up to me at a Masters of Horror dinner and introduced himself. And when we were shooting, he was the producer's assistant. And of course, I had no memory. But I mean, so he's been involved. He's been involved with Psycho since Psycho 2.
Really?
Right?
Wow.
And he's ended up being the showrunner, overseeing producer on the Bates Motel.
That's pretty cool.
Standing on the shoulders of giants.
Well, now, there's another. Before we get into the stage of your directing, we have to talk about, Matt, your favorite movie. Another great script and great film from the 80s.
Class of 1984.
Class of 1984.
Well, I'll give you another one. Cloak and Dagger.
Yeah.
Cloak and Dagger. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Dabney Coleman.
Yeah.
That's right.
Elliot.
Henry Thomas.
Did you just say Elliot?
Well, we know what you were trying to say.
We know.
But yeah, the whole idea of role playing and all that, which is just years before what it's become.
For Class of 84, Class of 84 works as a drama. And the one who gets credit for that is Mark Lester.
The director.
Yes.
Well, Mark Lester was also the producer. Mark Lester came to me, and he wanted to do that movie. He wanted to reprise Blackboard Jungle.
Right. Blackboard Jungle from the 80s.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. So it always had an exploitation slant, but he wanted to do it with the punk music.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so then it was, how do you give heart to something like that? And that led to the Roddy McDowell character, which is one of the reasons I cast him in Fright Night.
So great. Yeah.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah, I knew he could go there. Well, that's a horrible scene. The biology teacher walks into his classroom, and the bad kids have killed all of his rabbits and turtles, and just horrible.
And to see, you really just see in Roddy McDowell's eyes that thing that just broke his will.
Mm-hmm.
But that was also the first film that Michael J. Fox ever did.
That's right.
No, I did not know
correct.
that.
I don't know that either.
Yeah. And everyone's so great in that. Everybody, all the performances,
really,
really strong.
Good actors.
Yeah. And what's also really interesting, too, is how right on the money you were with predicting the future. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea of like metal detectors in high school, we were like, that's ridiculous.
Well, you could back then. I get, what year was that?
It was like 82, I think, when it came out, right?
Was it real? Okay, that early?
Yeah.
You can still find some good schools in the valley then.
Right.
You can still find some good public schools.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Class of 1984 is it's a lean, mean exploitation film, but it's like you said, it's a very good drama suspense movie.
It works dramatically.
Yes.
Right.
And character-wise, I mean, the characters are so strong. And right from Perry King to...
is it Vincent Van Patten?
Lisa Langlois.
Yeah.
Right.
Was it Vince or... I always get Vince and Timothy confused.
Timothy Van Patten.
Timothy Van Patten.
Vince was the dad.
No.
Who was Vince?
That was Dick Van Patten.
Dick Van Patten.
Yeah.
Who was Vince? Vince was
8 is enough.
Oh,
It's
my
Dick Van
gosh.
Patten.
Demon Booze. There you go.
That's a very good poster.
Isn't that great?
Where'd you get that from?
That's the alternate poster
Yes.
for Class of 1984. I found it at some convention. I'd never seen that poster before.
Our listeners, we have the poster here.
It's a great poster with Roddy McDowell. It's right from the movie where after his animals are killed, he decides to hold class in a very unique way at gunpoint. Which, teachers of tomorrow, he might have something there.
Well, I went to a party For 5 minutes, I was on Village of the Damned, and I couldn't get a script out of it, and I dropped out.
Oh.
And I think after me, Wes Craven came in. I don't know about the script, but I know he couldn't get the money that he wanted to make.
This was John Carpenter's remake?
Yes, and then John Carpenter ended up doing it.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And I went out to Shep Gordon's because he was the producer, music manager, and Alice Cooper was there. So I sat down and told Alice how much I'd enjoyed his theme song on Class of '84.
Right.
And all he wanted to talk about was Chucky.
Awesome. Well, okay.
Love that soundtrack, by the way.
Before we jump ahead, though, I want to set the stage here for us because it's like mid '80s, and now your first
set the table.
Your first directing job now was 1985 Fright Night. And this movie,
first directing job.
Yeah, I mean,
it's Fright Night.
In the way that, like, you know how American Werewolf in London and The Howling kind of brought the werewolf genre into the new age, into the 80s. I felt that's what Fright Night did so beautifully with vampires. It was an homage, and it was true to the traditional vampire films. It also gave it just that perfect modern 80s slant with great effects and just humor, and it was just a fantastic movie. And this is, you know, if you could tell us how that came about. Was it coming off of Psycho 2, Class of '84, how you got to write and direct Fright Night?
Yeah, well, by that point I was very, very hot as a writer. Mm-hmm. The Psycho 2 really opened it up for me.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Class of '84 certainly helped. The Cloak and Dagger, I think, helped a lot. Mm-hmm. And so I remember Bob Ramey, who ran Universal for 5 minutes at that time, turning to me after we had a test screening of Psycho 2, which was extremely positive, and said, "Well, so what movie do you want to direct for your next movie?" And I knew my life had changed. You know, it's a serious question about Fright Night, how that came to be. When I was writing Cloak and Dagger, which is the juvenile version of Rear Window, written by Cornell Woolrich. Mm-hmm. And it was a film that was made in 1948 or 49, but it was too thin to be remade. I mean, the basics, it's The Boy Who Cried Wolf.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I invented the imaginary character, Jack Flack, and had great fun with that. Mm-hmm. But when I was doing that, I thought to myself, wouldn't it be hysterically funny because it's about voyeurism, if a teenage horror fan becomes convinced that his next door neighbor is a vampire. Mm-hmm. And
Larry?
Yes. I know where you're
Sound familiar?
I know where you're going with this because I did have that thought. But go ahead. No, go ahead, Don. No, that film touched me. Okay, but go ahead.
Well, it just tickled me. The idea just tickled me pink. But I didn't really have a story. I had a premise. And I don't know how, but one day, I think I was at Columbia, but one day Peter Vincent just fell into my head because I said, well, if I was a horror movie fan and I became convinced that there was a vampire next door, who would I go to?
Right.
And I'd go to the Friday Night Fright host that I saw, you know. Mm-hmm. And the minute I had that, I couldn't wait long enough to get home and start writing.
Really?
I was just compelled. Now, you have to remember at that point, vampires were dead, and I don't mean.
No. We
know what you're talking about. Yeah.
No play on words.
Right.
Words and
it was all capes and that kind of thing.
It was really dead.
Yeah.
Because they'd had a huge, big budget bomb with a musical of Dracula with Frank Langella.
Oh, that's right.
And it was Robert Wise directing, I think. Yeah. And it was and that had been a successful play, and I don't know why it failed, but it failed spectacularly. And that was a terribly expensive movie.
My mom loved it, though.
Okay.
He had a great cape.
Yeah.
It was a really thick, thick velvety cape.
We got her the poster for that, and she has it in the laundry room right now.
Okay.
And her private moments without my dad. Anyway, go on.
But then,
that's my mom.
But then you had a farce, Love at First Bite.
Yes.
With George
Yes. Big hit.
And when a genre goes into farce,
bingo.
And you could say it's getting close with some of the Chucky movies, but when that happens, it usually means the genre is exhausted.
Abbott and Costello meets Frankenstein.
Yeah, we talked.
Yeah. But I mean, I riffed that in Fright Night.
Yes, you did. Yeah.
I mean, when Roddy and Charlie are going up the stairs, and all of a sudden Billy Cole sits up behind them and starts up the stairs. That's Abbott and Costello.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I mean, I just had the best time writing that. And I was giggling and laughing. I mean, it sounds to make yourself laugh when you're doing the writing.
Sure, but that's the best.
That's all I've got.
And you came, you
never happened to me again.
but like all of us, like we're such fans of this stuff, and we grew up watching horror hosts on TV. I mean, so much of it comes from that.
That's what it comes from for me.
You know, and it's so interesting, Tom. In Fright Night, where you have this horror host who's actually he's going off the air. I mean, Matt and I, we can talk about this too. When Creature Features in Northern California, they went off the air too, and this was something it
was heartbreaking.
It was so dear to my heart, and it was like Channel 2 had been sold to Fox or something, and that was gone. It was a part of my life that was gone.
Tom, did you have a horror host in your youth?
Yes, we did, and I can't remember. It was Stagger Lee. There was Vampira.
Wow.
But there were some other lots of
local ones. Yeah,
really jokey guys, and I can't remember now.
Well, getting back to Fright Night, because it is like one of my favorite films. One of the things I absolutely love about it, I mean, you had so many great things in this film. I mean, it spoke to me in so many different ways. Number one, if you think about it in '85, this is like also the MTV era, you know? And here you have this vampire, you know, who's, I mean, I remember when you first see Chris Sarandon. And he looks so freaking cool. And remember, and it's like we're gone with the cape, we're gone with the tie, we're gone with all the
pure charisma.
Totally. And I, you know, here I am like a pudgy little pimply kid. Oh gosh, you know, I would love to be that guy. You know,
right? Yeah.
He has. Remember that big leather jacket?
I do.
This is kind of, you know, that gray leather jacket. It looks so freaking cool.
He was great.
I mean, and then actually, not only is it's MTV area and it looks so great, but you have an amazing cast with Chris Sarandon. You know, Roddy McDowell and
Stephen Jeffries.
Yeah.
Stephen Jeffries, William Ragsdale,
right.
Amanda Bierce.
And everybody. And what?
I'm sorry. Matt, correct me if I'm wrong here. I mean, she goes through this transformation because if you think about it, she starts out at the very beginning, you know, when they're like making out on the floor. Dude, I was there, man. I was on that same floor with pillows, you know, with my girlfriend.
Wow.
No, back then.
With Amanda Bierce?
No, not then. With my girlfriend
Girlfriend?
Yes. You know, yes, some of these guys don't know what a girlfriend is, okay? I had one, okay?
No, I was surprised you did, but go ahead.
No, but she goes through this transformation where she starts, remember she has a little ribbon in her hair?
I know.
Remember that?
Right.
It's kind of like that cute teenager thing, and then
when she gets full-on vampire luscious.
Well, you're forgetting about, she goes from there, remember there's the whole, they're in the disco area, you know, and she gets a little bit more womanly there, you know?
There's a kind of it's like a courting scene during the dance.
And that beautiful scene with the mirror.
Oh yeah, the mirror where she can't see. But then finally, after she gets bitten, and then there's that last transformation.
Well,
before she becomes a feral dynamo. There's that where she's like mid between the original Amanda Bierce and then the crazy vampire.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the one I want to take home.
Well, hey, Tom, it was an amazing cast. Everyone was perfect in that film.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you. It was an amazing experience. I had a ton of time. I was beautifully supported. Tip of the hat to a guy named Shel Schrager, who was head of production at Columbia, and he passed on to me Richard Edlund and the entire Ghostbusters crew.
Really?
Yes.
We had like Steve Johnson, Steve Neal, all those big...
Randy Cook. I was stupid lucky, and I was too inexperienced to know it, but I had the right support. I got John DeCure Sr. and Jr. as my production designers. Mm-hmm. I got the entire crew of Ghostbusters. Wow. And every which was a huge, huge film.
Yeah.
And we were the little film that was a toss away, that nobody expected anything of, that everybody thought was a low-rent horror film. And the only reason Columbia was making it was because I was so hot as a writer. But nobody paid any attention. Their eyes were on Perfect. And they thought
with John Travolta and
Jamie Lee
Curtis.
Yes.
Oh my God.
They thought that was the huge hit in the slate. And Guy McElwain, with that moment, was head of Columbia, said in lamentation, really, that he might end up, his career at Columbia might end up being remembered only for Fright Night. Wow. You know, and by the way, another terrific guy. But I mean, so I just got an amazing amount of support, and the studio left me totally alone.
No.
Well, because the eyes were on everybody else. That's what a great environment to make a movie.
And we were this little movie. Now, that's never happened since. There hasn't been one movie that I've done since where I wasn't under pressure of one kind or another and or interference from the studios.
Wow.
Really?
You get to a place.
My first movie, which is where you'd think you'd get a storm of shit coming down.
Right.
Nobody even bothered to call.
That's amazing. Well, thank God.
Yeah.
But you know,
doesn't it teach the lesson though of, hey, what if we left the filmmaker alone to make a movie?
To do their job,
No,
you know?
Maybe it would be great all the time, or at least a lot of the time.
Well, there's been nothing else like it, has there?
No.
And Tom,
No.
while we're lucky enough to have you here, I want to thank you personally for providing Roddy McDowall with maybe his last great genre role, if not his last great role, because we all love him
So much.
He was a huge influence on all of us. And this was the perfect role for him.
Yeah.
it really was.
At that stage in his career.
Every element of it too.
I wish he was still around.
Yeah, we all do.
He had two. I know. You never know what you can say these days. He had two sit-down dinners a week. He had a couple who lived with him, and basically it was the cook and the
butler, or
the butler, I guess. They're a married couple, but what they did is they cooked for him 2 nights a week, and one night was all the straight people. And the other night was all gay. You know?
Which night was the food better?
I never made it to the but what Roddy had, Roddy shared with me anyway, because I'm a fan. I mean, basically, I'm like you guys. You know, I mean, except my love has taken me into spending my life doing this. But I would just sit gaga with and listening to Roddy's stories and all the mistakes I made, the props I didn't keep, the autographs I didn't get. I had dinner at Roddy's with Vincent Price and Vincent's wife.
No.
Yes, and Vincent was failing. Vincent was failing.
Yeah.
I mean, I had wanted to cast him initially in Fright Night.
Yeah.
And his health wasn't good enough. And on top of that, he was good friends with Roddy.
Yeah.
and Roddy really wanted that part. Roddy read that and said, But what Roddy did was Roddy passed on the accumulated knowledge of the previous generations, because he was that guy out of Mad Max who kept the verbal historical record. He was the guy who would sit down and could talk for 3 hours about being in children's school at Fox and at MGM when his best friend was Elizabeth Taylor. But I had another amazing experience with him. MGM was closing down finally. This is where you get confused. They had all these wonderful obituaries for Kirk Kerkorian. Kirk Kerkorian destroyed MGM.
Yes, he did.
He was a rug merchant. He was a destroyer of tradition.
The destroyer of companies, basically.
Destroyer of companies.
It's like sell it off.
Horrible.
He destroyed something so great.
Destroyed the most prestigious and the biggest studio in Hollywood. He destroyed MGM. He gutted it, and he gutted it 3 times. I remember when Laddie was the last guy there, and they had sold off the lot to Sony, and
this is Alan Ladd Jr.
Yeah, and Roddy and I were walking the lot, and Roddy would point to this or that studio, this or that dressing room, and tell me who had been in there, tell me who had had an affair over there.
Really?
Wow.
He pointed out to me at the back of the Thalberg building, where Katharine Hepburn met Spencer Tracy for the first time.
Wow.
He carried that kind of knowledge. And then we walked down, because the MGM then, probably still, had all these heating tunnels under that were built that you could walk through because you get down there and you could repair the gas lines and the electrical line.
Yeah.
And they had taken all their nitrate film and they had it down in these tunnels. And even when we walked through the place, which must have been 85, 86, 87, the nitrate prints were still there.
Really?
Wow.
And then we went into the research library at MGM, and the librarian was seated at a table crying because everything was being thrown out. All the research books, all the stills of all the stars. And I should have just loaded up the car. And I was just too dumb. But so that was the kind of education I got from Roddy.
Yeah.
But he could walk past the sound stages because he'd been in the children's school. He'd been there since he was 8, 9, 10.
Yeah.
And he could point out what stages, what movies were made on. And he could tell you where Judy Garland's, and where they had their tryst, because if you screwed somebody, it went immediately throughout the lot.
Matt knows how much I love Judy Garland, so it's on another podcast.
Let it go.
Okay.
Let it go.
Okay.
That's amazing.
So Roddy had an aesthetic. Roddy also worked and got as much work as he did because, in a sense, he was a professional friend. He had everybody who was anybody over at one time or another, and the friendship was quite often repaid with jobs. I met Henry King, the directed a Western that Roddy did back in the 60s or the 70s. Great credits, detective story. Lee Remick, when she was dying, the Brit who directed Darling and Marathon Man.
Schlesinger?
Yeah,
John
Schlesinger. I had dinner with him.
Are there those moments where you kind of like check in with yourself?
Yeah.
And you go,
Pinch me.
is this
Pinch me.
really happening?
Yeah.
I am living the dream.
Yeah.
And Dennis Hopper. And Dennis was finally straight. He was off of all drugs, and he was as mean as a snake.
Really?
Oh, God.
Wow.
Would he say nasty things?
Well, no, he was just edgy.
Really?
He was edgy, like he was still on coke or something.
Yeah.
But I mean he was a jumpy personality.
Yeah. Well, he had towards the end. I mean, he actually had a really good career with a lot of the
towards the end.
Towards the end,
Blue
actually. Blue Velvet.
Yeah.
I
I always wonder, though, if, like, to borrow a phrase from my friend, comedian Rick Overton,
Yeah.
if maybe he should have gone just warm turkey.
There was a story, and I asked Dennis about it, and he actually didn't want to talk about it, but he was making a Western with John Wayne, and it may be the Sons of Katie Elder.
Or is that a Red River?
No,
That was Sons of Katie Elder?
I
Okay,
think so. I think
trust
so.
you guys.
Was not Red River.
No.
Who's the director?
Of Sons of Katie River?
Yeah, Katie Elder.
Katie Elder. Demon Moose.
Sons of Red Elder.
Henry Hathaway?
Henry Hathaway.
Henry Hathaway.
Excuse me, that's who it was. Henry Hathaway. Henry Hathaway you did not screw around with. Hathaway wanted a line read a certain way, and Dennis would not do it.
Oh, that's right. This famous story.
And
He
this-
went on
this
for
story.
hours.
For hours.
Yeah.
For hours.
That's right.
And at the end of it, I don't know if Hathaway was a very strong guy. I met him at Roddy's house too. But I mean, he was, he was a tough,
Strong-willed.
tough old. Oh God, yeah. Those guys in those days, they weren't about any of this art crap.
Right.
Well, no, they considered themselves skilled tradesmen.
Oh.
Go look at a John Ford interview.
Yeah.
The word artist, his teeth would crumble if he had to say that about himself. And Hathaway was the same way. Anyway, he spent all day on one line
With Dennis Hopper trying
with
to get him
Dennis
to say the
Hopper,
scene.
and Hopper wouldn't give it to him, and Hathaway would not stop, and it was 300-400 takes. And at that point, Dennis didn't work for 12 years.
That's right. Yeah.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Who got the last laugh there, though?
Yeah, right. Hey,
Exactly.
art, I think, won in that.
Yeah. But then Dennis, after the success, which I think was probably totally inadvertent, of
Easy
Easy Rider,
Rider,
Yeah.
went off with Stewart's script, and Stewart and Joe Sargent were the two best screenwriters in Hollywood for character. He went off with Stuart Stern's screenplay to Peru, at which they all went up to the mountains and got outrageously stoned and ripped.
I remember this story.
And he totally trashed Stuart's script. And Stuart had written it with Dennis on spec off of their relationship out of Rebel Without a Cause. And Stuart never forgave Dennis. Stuart would not sit with Dennis on a panel.
Wow.
And these guys have been friends since like 1950 or something.
Was that the script for the last movie? Or?
Yes, the last movie was written by Stuart Stern.
Wow.
But Dennis didn't shoot it, and Dennis wasn't coherent enough. And then Dennis took all of his money, went down to Taos, bought a ranch that if he still had it would be worth $50 million, and proceeded to spend like 2 or 3 years trying to cut the last movie together.
Almost his last movie. Life imitates art,
and could not do it. So you had these cascading stories going on from these people that I met, and at the same time I'm working and I'm writing scripts.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time I'm enthralled.
And I assume that Roddy McDowall was great to work with on Fright Night too. I mean, was he just jump into the role, and was it an easy task to direct him?
Yes. I mean, I wish I could say I did it all for Roddy, but no. Roddy took the image of the Cowardly Lion, from the Wizard of Oz.
Right.
Yes,
Totally,
And he went, and what Roddy did was Roddy became like I don't want to say like a father, but like an uncle to the cast, except for Stephen Jeffries, whom he hated.
Really?
Yeah, you'd have.
So here we got to go. Let's get some stories here.
You'd have to talk to Stephen about it. I don't know. They had that scene where where Stephen attacks him in Roddy's apartment, and Roddy burns his forehead with the cross.
Great scene.
And Roddy became outraged, and came to me complaining that Stephen wasn't being professional because he wasn't following the fight as blocked out by the the stunt coordinator. So I didn't know what the hell was going on.
Right.
I think I should be kind and keep my mouth shut.
No, you can't go this far without. I'm on pins and needles here.
Well, ultimately the scene turned out great though.
Yeah.
I go to Stephen and I say, don't pull him around so hard, maybe, huh? And Stephen says to me, well, the old clean wants to go to bed with me, and I wouldn't do it.
Oh.
Hey.
Wow.
He should be flattered.
Yeah, really.
Yes, he should.
Yeah.
But it's funny, that whole scene, that sequence is really, really cool when he gets the cross burned on him and stuff.
Great.
And because he gives this howl, I can't even do it. It's such a high-pitched howl.
And that's one of the things that really stands out.
Steven.
Really talented actor.
He was great. He's great.
Like a breakout role for him.
And that's what's wonderful. For example, that character, which is, there's a wonderful balance of humor and horror in that movie.
That was the only bump in the entire movie.
Really? That's filming that scene.
Yes. And for whatever reason, there was antagonism, but it was on Roddy's part.
Right.
Yeah. But those characters, and that's one of the things that we've talked about with horror comedy. The best horror comedies are the ones where they play the horror straight.
The characters are genuinely scared.
You can't break the third wall. I mean, what happens, and this was a complaint of mine back then. I think you have a less of a problem now because horror is exploding, it seems to me. I mean, here we are doing a show about it. But the genre is exploding. But back then, it really was more of the ugly stepchild. But back then, what was going on was that so many people were ashamed of having to do it. You especially had writers and directors looking down on it. And so you would get movies where they would be nudge, wink, wink.
Yeah. Look how funny and silly we are.
Yes, but I'm not. I can do better than this, and I'm not taking it seriously either.
Right.
And what that did is absolutely killed it.
Absolutely.
And I've always objected to that, and I refused to do it. And the reality of the situation, I played it straight all the way through Fright Night, which is why it works. Because if you're going to go and see a story and see a movie, you want to identify with it and get inside the movie.
Yeah,
right.
And that also applies to Child's Play.
You know, one thing I one thing I really love is when they show a scene of a movie with Peter Vincent. There's like little clips, and it looks. I don't know if you shot it on 16 millimeter or something in the movie. And there's a shot of Roddy McDowall. He starts to like hammer,
deliberate,
and just he's hammering the steak, and then he looks so serious, and then the spurt of blood goes in his face, and you could tell that he's a bit irritated or something. Just when he tries to stay in character, it's like
playing it perfectly straight.
Every time I see it, I just start busting up. I love that scene.
Look at it again, because what you'll see is the steak is upside down.
Interesting.
He's pounding.
Did you do that deliberately?
Yes.
Wow, that's awesome.
Because that's how bad it was when I was watching them as a kid.
That's great.
Awesome.
That was deliberate.
You know, one thing too is that Tom's like we are such fans of old style practical effects.
Practical effects.
When you were writing, when you were making that movie, did you always have in mind to have these effects set pieces? Because again, unlike a lot of CGI films, those effects still to this day hold up beautifully. The makeup, Chris Sarandon when he his vampiric side, the makeup, the eyes, the teeth, it's still so good.
And with Amanda Beer,
well, and then the melting body
the bat creature, the reverse wolf transformation where Stephen Jeffrey turns back into a human. But the effects are so good, and like you said, you had some of the best guys.
I had the best guys. Well, Richard Edlund, with visual effects, you couldn't get any better. But I got to tell you, I'd seen a little bit of that in Psycho too, because we had Albert Whitlock, who was the great matte painter, doing, and it may have been his last or next to last job.
Yeah.
But Richard Edlund was top of what could be done in those days. But you also Amy's mouth, I saw that when I was blocking it.
Yeah.
I saw that she was turned away.
Yeah.
And she could come back around for a terrific scare.
Yeah.
And I had Steve Johnson make that up out of nothing in about half an hour before we started to shoot.
Really?
Are you serious?
And it became the image of the poster.
I know.
Yeah.
So where are those action figures? By the way?
Where are the
Fright Night
toy
action
collectors?
figures?
Tom, this is something you need to work on. We've talked about this for years.
I'm trying. I have Tom Holland's Terror Time, TH Terror Time. This is a plug. This is
absolutely.
a plug out there for the.
Please,
but
plug away.
I'm trying to put together horror art and action figures for my movies and for other movies. I've got Joe Dante, who's been helping out by signing for me, or with me. But I would like to put together, sculptors and the artists, because guys like Steve Johnson was with me all the way through Langoliers, I think.
Wow.
These people who they should be.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you know what? Hopefully, Tom, after this podcast, maybe in a year or two, we're going to see these, because I expect that.
We'll buy everything.
After this, Tom, you're going to have to talk to Matt.
I want to see a Peter Vincent action figure with a little steak. And
Larry will buy two.
Yes, I will be two. One will be Mint Impact.
He buys two of everything,
yes,
so that's right there.
And you have to have a Jerry Dandridge, and you have to have and you have to have an Amy, and you have to have an Amy in like teenage version, and then vampire version. Oh God, you got to do it, Tom. You got to do it.
No, I was talking to a fellow named Jeff Brown, who I admire, who's a sculptor and also does dioramas about exactly this all day today. If you go to my Tom Holland's Facebook page, and then Tom Holland's Terror Time, you can see the work, because I'm putting up so many images of the art that I enjoy.
Awesome.
But it's a lot of it's fan art.
Yeah.
But when you start getting into the handmade stuff, not the stuff that's manufactured, but the stuff that's done individually one by one, you're talking some real money. You're talking.
Yeah. No.
Right.
We believe me. We know.
So now, Tom, I'm just curious. The Fright Night remake. Thoughts? How much did you have?
Yes, curious to see
do with
what you
that?
think.
Did you have anything to do with it?
I had nothing to do with it. And furthermore, they didn't ask me.
Are you serious? They didn't ask you?
No.
You wrote it.
No, they didn't ask me. Nobody ever called me. And then when they had the premiere, nobody invited me.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So
Unbelievable.
So what happened was my lawyer called up, I think it was DreamWorks,
Yeah.
and got me an invitation. And then I refused to go, of course.
All right.
Fantastic.
Tom,
right on.
Tom, just so you know, Tom, you didn't miss much.
Yeah.
Well, you know, Sean, I refused to see it. I'm sorry, I refused.
Well, I kind of wish I had refused.
Really?
I did go to see it. I paid my money. I saw it in 3D. And I must tell you that on the level of professionalism, I thought everybody did an excellent job.
Okay.
I mean, I thought the actors...
Acting-wise, yes.
Sure.
But no, it was very competently directed. It was,
Story is what I'm talking about.
well,
here.
but I mean, it was very, very competently written. Because see, what happens is I know so many people. I run across these people. Yeah. But, okay, so all of that being said, I don't know this, but I would say somebody, probably the producer, said, well, let's update this. Let's bring this into 2012 or 14 or whatever it was. Yeah. And when the minute you start doing that, then their idea of creativity is, well, that was a cool vampire in 30 Hours of Night or whatever, 30 Days of Night. And that was a cool vampire that we saw in whatever, Twilight.
Right.
And I really liked, and then they turn to the poor writer and say, well, we'd like to get rid of that old-fashioned Jerry Dandridge, and we'd like to have a Stone Cold Killer, like 30 Days of Night. So, and then it begins to shift. Then you go to also what happens with writers. And I have no idea whether any of these things happen, but writers try to write themselves onto the movie for a credit. Now, in this case, they certainly had the credit going in, and I never disputed. I got story credit on it, but I had no interest in screenwriting credit. Look, what made the original...
Great.
Thank you. What's made it last as long as it has and what's made it grow is that it has heart and charm.
Yes.
Yeah. Heart.
Yes, it does.
So they literally ripped the heart.
Ripped out the heart. Yes.
And I mean, I think the guy who played Jerry Dandridge is a very good actor. The Irish.
Colin Farrell.
Colin Farrell.
Yeah. Fantastic. I honestly didn't have a problem with any of the acting.
They gave him nothing to play.
Oh.
I mean, it is the worst. It is the worst sabotaging of a talented actor I've ever seen. They just played him as a cold kill. They took all the charm away from him.
Yes.
Yeah.
They made him one. I mean, it was just horrible.
I mean, like the little touches, like in the original, Chris Sarandon's always eating the apple and stuff
That's
like
right.
that, and like
Love
there's
that. A
tiny little
vampire
things.
that loves
It's
apples.
great.
Yes, but he also, Amanda Beers was Nina Harker, reborn.
Right, right.
I mean, he had a reason to be in love with her.
That's right. Remember he had there was the painting.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right.
And also, doesn't
There's
he
a
say
link to the past.
Doesn't he say to Charlie, "I'm going to give you a choice, something that I didn't have"?
That's
I think,
right.
and
That's
so
right.
it's so it's like Matt. He didn't have a choice. So in a way, you can feel sympathetic towards
right.
him.
Yes, you do.
Right.
But you immediately feel sympathetic for him right off the bat because of the fact that he is charming. And he does actually kind of give Charlie some chances.
Yeah.
You kind of like him.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But poor Colin, they gave Colin Farrell nothing to play. Then what they
And then
did,
David Tennant. Oh, my God.
Oh my God. Oh God. Well, that's Buffy. All of a sudden, you bring in a past where his grandparents.
Why do they always do that with these modern films? They have to have the past disconnected.
Well,
like, no.
But you took a ham actor who was endearing and charming and wonderful, and made him into an asshole and a drunk with a Las Vegas magic.
Yeah, the
act.
leather pants and
Well, if you had known your audience, you would have taken the modern Peter Vincent and put him at a signing table at a convention.
Yes, exactly.
Genius.
You are genius.
Yes.
And you know what, Tom? I would have paid to see that movie.
Yeah.
That is great.
But I mean, you had.
We're going to refilm it. Come on.
I knew it was off at the very beginning when the inciting incident isn't Charlie seeing Jerry Dandridge next door. It's Evil Ed, who's played by the McLovin character.
Yes, yeah.
And he's the one that saw it. So now you have
it's not even from the right point of view.
Now you don't have anybody.
There's no personal connection to it.
There's nothing motivating Charlie. So you absolutely wrecked it. But I don't blame that on the writer, because you could feel the producers or whoever
the studio tampering,
all
such a
over
shame.
it.
Yes, it was a product and not
completely
like right.
There was no understanding, there was no affection, and I did an amazing story for Spielberg, and he came on the set. Well, I did with Jonathan Cryer, and he came on the set when I was shooting and spent 10 minutes telling me how much he loved Fright Night. so my only
rightly so.
So my only question is, if you like the movie so much, why didn't you just damn well shoot the thing?
right.
You know, I mean, you go crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like Fright Night 2 that Tommy Lee Wallace did. I mean, Tommy's a very talented guy. There was an awful lot that was good about it. Herb Jaffe, the producer, whom I brought aboard for the original because I already had the deal, was too cheap to pay Chris Sarandon.
No.
Oh, my God.
Are you serious?
Yes. So what he did is he brought Julie Carmen, who, by the way,
sister.
is a wonderful person and a lovely actress and all the rest of it. But he should have had Jerry Dandridge there as well.
Right.
Sure.
Resurrected.
And Herb didn't want to take his hand out of his pocket.
That's a shame.
So you look at these decisions, which I've seen made all my life.
Like you said, that's why when we did Fright Night, you were left alone, and that's why it's as good as it is.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, for better or for worse, I have Tom Holland's Twisted Tales. I'm about ready to put them up in the next month or two on Terror Time, my website, and you're going to be able to download them from there. There was some suggestion. I was just talking to
Matt Weinhold.
Matt Weinhold.
My wife forgets it too.
About one of the episodes called The Pizza Guy.
Now, this is an anthology.
It's an anthology series, which is very interesting because we just did an episode about anthology series. But I love this episode because this woman is trying to raise the devil in an attempt to get her sister back.
Who's dead.
Who is dead. So they call up the devil, and then all of a sudden a pizza guy shows up. And so is this the devil, or is it just a pizza guy?
Right.
And through this entire story, you're trying to figure out, is he the devil? Pizza guy. And there are times where you go, it's the devil. Oh, no, it's a pizza guy. Because the guy keeps wanting his money for the pizza all the way through the story. It's fantastic.
Awesome.
And
But this is where the studio gets in the way.
Okay.
Because I had the pizza guy eventually get his $8.95, or eventually say the hell with it. I can't remember. and he leaves, and these terrible things have happened. But they all seem to have been inadvertent when you look at
Yes,
it.
yeah.
It could be the devil, or it could be
circumstantial.
Yeah.
circumstantial. I mean,
Yeah.
people are cutting off their fingers. People are falling and knocking their heads and killing themselves. But at the end of it, I had the pizza guy walk out, and you never knew. And it absolutely drove FearNet, which was the company that I did it for. It's extinct now. It drove them crazy not knowing.
Ambiguity. Oh my gosh.
Ambiguity.
Can't have that.
No way.
Not allowed.
There's also a fun episode about a GPS that sort of talks back to its
Yes,
driver.
that was fun too. My three favorite. I did one that really is a thinking man's story called Shockwave, and that has Angela Bettis and a terrific cast: James Duval, Amber Benson, Josh Holland.
Cool.
But I mean, it's a very, very
End of the world scenario.
Very, very strong story. But two stories that work really well is Bite, which I think is a movie. And Bite's about a bunch of kids are smoking weed in a pot shop.
Yeah.
And they get a designer drug called Bite, which apparently they want to smoke because it shows you what the future's going to be. And then they smoke it, and they start to hear news reports and gunfire and everything else. And there are outbreaks of people who've taken smoked this weed, and they're turning into monsters. Wow. I mean, and killing each other.
Talk about paranoia.
Well, but I mean, I thought that would be a terrific movie if all of a sudden you had outbreaks of where people were turning into werewolves.
Sure.
Or werewolf-like
Sure.
monsters
Right.
all around L.A.
Well, and it's so like ripped from the front page
Yeah, it's
too.
topical.
With like bath salts and all this kind of stuff.
And there's another one that I really like called Cashed, which is with a very talented actor named Adam Rose, who's a comedian who's now he's doing 3-minute things for Mark Cuban now, comedy things. But he came on and he did a character about the ghost in the machine, the killer trapped in the iPad.
Yeah. He's great.
But he really is great. Yeah, he makes it with a maniacal glee. And I look at that, and this is one of the things that's interesting about going on the net. I'm going to be able to tell from the audience reaction what they
You'll
like.
get instant reaction. That's great.
And if I get a couple of these that go a little viral or whatever, and yes, Fred and his GPS, that's AJ Bowen.
Yeah.
That's right.
I did also enjoy. There's one where I've never seen this done before, but a bomb.
Yes.
That is a Rube Goldberg contraption. And when you see the inner workings that this guy has made this bomb that it's impossible to defuse. And when you look inside the workings of it, it's all little ramps and balls rolling back and forth.
Yeah.
And I'd never seen that. And I was like, that is a very good idea for a bomb.
2 Iraqi bomb disposal guys now back here, and one of them suspects the other one is sleeping with his wife.
Infidelity is sort of a common theme in some of these stories.
Well, yes, I say that
again. Infidelity is kind of a common theme.
Well, do you want to talk?
Well, no, but I'll tell you what Stuart Stern said to me. He said, since the beginning of man, it's always been the 7 deadly sins. I mean, motivations are really simple. You can put a lot of layers on top of it.
It always comes down to
it comes down to jealousy, envy, gluttony, sleeping with somebody's
greed,
sloth.
Yeah.
But the great thing is, Tom, you are still cranking out stuff.
Yeah. Are you going to do more of these by any chance?
I'm going to do more of these. I'm going to see what the reaction is and what the numbers are in terms of the views. And I've also got 4 Kindle singles called Tom Holland's Untold Tales that are up on my website. They're also on Amazon. I'm at 71,000 words of a novel right now.
Nice. Now, is it like a genre story, or is it just categorize it?
Well, no, it's not. I don't think it's genre, but it's end of the world.
Okay.
Works for me.
We like it.
Right.
You basically have 4 young thieves who are hijacking trucks, and they almost run down a kid. And they get stuck with a kid, and it turns out the kid can heal with his touch.
Oh, well, that's genre.
Yeah. Works for us.
Yeah.
Fantastical element in it. Yeah.
But this is a novel that we can look forward to seeing in maybe like next year or something.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I hope before then.
And Tom, what's your website again?
That's called The Boy, and the website is called Tom Holland's Terror Time, or TH Terror Time. Okay. And thank you very much for the plug.
No,
you'll get many chances. We're a plug-a-thon.
After I keep drinking, I just need to hear it a second or third time.
We were talking earlier before this started, and you were talking about the internet and what's going on there.
Yeah.
The other thing that's really interesting, I think, are micro movies, which if you can come out with 15 to 30 second bites, and if somehow you can cliffhang 15 to 30 seconds, no easy job. But if you can, then I would love to somehow take horror and put it in very short bites and put it on the internet that could be watched on your cell phone. Because I think that's a way of introducing myself to a whole younger audience.
So like story-driven, very short little vignettes almost?
Yeah, but I think story-driven, but I mean, I'm interested in technical problems. I mean, there were a lot of challenges to doing Twisted Tales because I did them for absolutely no money. In fact, I'm out of pocket on it. I'll never get it back. But what I learned was when you have very, very little money, you're really dependent upon story and on your actors,
ingenuity, and
actors. Yes. I mean, I tell you, it really is what's in front of the camera. And I think with the younger audiences now, I don't think production value is that important. But I think that the stories and the acting has to be really, really strong. And so because of the financial limitations on Twisted Tales, they're really one-act plays.
Right.
Yeah.
They really take place in one set. Because
we're also dealing with much shorter attention spans for younger audiences.
Well, that's what everybody keeps saying. But I mean, tell me how you can make. I mean, I'm going to try, but tell me how you can make 15 to 30 second segments that make you want to watch the next 30 seconds.
That's the challenge.
Yeah.
Well, Christ, you can't have more than a 2-line dialogue exchange, can you?
Yeah.
Because you don't have time.
Everything's going to be a Vine video.
Or add nudity.
Well,
there you go.
Okay. Well, I mean, no.
Or the or the promise of nudity.
I like this new Larry.
No.
But
That's the Playboy talking.
what has film been since its beginning? It's been action, which is a synonym for violence, and sex, which is
conflict.
Pretty girls.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the
True.
very first films weren't that long, right? They were just a few seconds.
Yeah.
The first one,
Moviolas.
And when it comes to sex,
the great train robber.
when it comes to sex, though, I mean, 15 seconds, right?
Look. This is all great and fine. Okay, I just want to take this 15 seconds. Look, we talked about a lot of stuff, but I can't let you go until we talk about one of the most evil dolls of all time.
Yeah.
Now, coming off of Fright Night.
There was a movie that came out that kind of changed my life and maybe the world.
Yeah.
And it was called Child's Play.
Child's Play.
Featuring a doll that has become kind of, I don't know, maybe my little best friend.
One of the icons of horror.
Yeah, really.
I mean, and
who would have known?
At one point, we were talking about there was a time during when the Universal monsters were coming up where there was this pantheon of characters, monsters, and they would fight each other, whatever.
Yeah.
And we got to a place now with Jason,
Freddy,
Michael Myers, Freddy,
Pinhead,
and then Chucky, a
Chucky.
doll. And again, this is a movie that has this balance once again of humor and horror. Horror played deadly serious because
build up a good long build up
nice
before you
build
see
up.
Chucky.
And please just lead us into the path that led to Child's Play.
Well, there was an original script. I didn't like it, but I liked the idea of a doll that came to life because that was a moment in time when they finally put the first rudimentary computer chips into dolls.
Yeah.
Right.
And it used to be you'd lay the little girl doll down, you'd lift her up, and she'd say, "I want to pee."
Wouldn't it say "Mama"?
Yeah.
Mama or
The eyes would open, the eyes would close. And that's about
the
it.
one doll that survived the nuclear holocaust in Planet of the Apes.
That's right. That's what I know of. Okay.
But that was all they did.
Right.
And the minute they put a computer chip in them, you never knew what the damn doll was going to say.
Right.
And that opened up all kinds of possibilities. On top of that, I was a rabid fan, like you,
Yes.
of Trilogy of Terror.
The Zuni fetish doll.
Karen Black.
And
Richard Matheson.
And I had seen Prey, or the Zuni doll.
Yeah,
Right,
it's called
right.
Amelia.
And
And the story was called Prey.
the story's called Prey.
Yes, but the
and
TV show
what
was called-
Dan Curtis, who is an unsung genius and not an easy man. Well, no,
I've heard that.
Yeah.
The last acting job I did was 1982 in Winds of War.
Oh.
And all Dan Curtis did was scream the entire time.
Really?
Ah.
But he had made Trilogy of Terror, so he was God in my eyes.
I'm with you there.
We'll take it.
Yeah.
Also, when I was doing A Time for Us, the soap at ABC, he was in the floor above me doing Dark Shadows.
No way. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so I was there for the beginning of Dark Shadows.
Oh, that's so cool.
Nice.
Wow.
So anyway, I knew because of Prey, the Zuni doll, that I could take and put a camera. They didn't have when he did that. They didn't have Steadicams.
No.
He'd taken and put it on roller skates.
Genius.
and he put it right down to the ground.
Yeah, he did.
But all he had was a 6-inch tall, stupid doll, and all he would do was put that in the camera, and he'd wave the doll.
Surprisingly effective.
Tom, it frightened the hell out of me.
Yes,
Sure, all of it.
but then what he did was he cut to a moving point of view. So I knew because of that whenever I got into trouble with Chucky, that I could cut to a moving point of view and it would get me out of it.
Okay.
Right,
So
right.
I had a technique of film to get around whatever problems I had with the doll, and I also had that moment in time when dolls, because you never knew what they were going to say, were becoming more lifelike. And also I'd had an example during Poltergeist where the clown came alive.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And
One of Matt's favorite movies.
I've always looked for something that's universal and a universal theme. There's been no kid that hasn't at one time or another thought, wouldn't it be fun or really scary if my playthings came alive?
Right.
And that's a
It's
universal.
like evil Pinocchio.
That's right. So I got myself into it and I tried to write it, and then I had terrible times because everybody around me was dying. I lost my parents.
Oh wow!
I lost my mother a year and a day after my father, and then my best friend, a lovely human being called Hal Buckley, passed of AIDS. Because that also was that moment in time
in the 80s.
when AIDS was going through the gay community here, and I must have lost a good 20 people that were dear friends.
Wow!
And I couldn't. I spent like 9 months trying to come up with a draft of Child's Play. It had originally been called Blood Buddy, and I couldn't do it. And so I left it, and I think I went off and made Fatal Beauty, but I'm not sure. And then Joe Rubin, who directed Stepfather, came on,
right.
and he tried it, and he had a writer on it, and he couldn't come up with it. And then I came back to it, and I could never quite leave it alone. And what happened was there was no bad guy in the original script. There was no story like the one that I wrote. And when I came up with the idea of Charles Lee Ray,
Brad Dourif.
then that's right.
Great
When I created Charles Lee Ray, the whole story fell into place in my head.
I see.
And I must have wrote that in 3 or 4 weeks after trying for 2 or 3 years.
Wow.
So how it works, I don't know. I really don't know how it works.
But that's that movie though. As far as script writing, it's an exercise in lean, efficient writing. It really is. From point A to point B to point C, it works beautifully, and it also is very believable because it's really Catherine Hicks' story. Really,
Right.
I mean, in a lot of ways, it's the mom who's trying to convince everybody, and but you don't. The audience knows something's up with the doll, but the characters don't for quite a while until it's very well done.
Okay, thank you very much. That's one of my favorite themes. The take away all safe spaces. You're the only one who believes.
Right.
Everybody else thinks you're mad.
Right.
And that includes Fright Night.
Fright Night,
That includes Cloak and Dagger.
Yeah.
Even Class of 1984.
Did I do that with Class of '84?
Yeah,
the
no one
kids-
believes that these kids
Right.
are actually doing all this stuff.
Capable of this.
Yes.
Right.
Well, I mean that's one of my favorite setups. Was when I came up with the character Charles Lee Ray, that the whole story fell into place. But so you have one of my favorite themes where nobody believes you, and so the hero has nobody you can go to, or the heroine, and also that's visual set pieces coming into play again.
Right.
And that's what I learned from Richard Franklin in studying Hitchcock and Psycho 2. Wow. And I think that I timed out an 8-minute suspense sequence from the time, because this is really a beautiful build, say so myself, but it's when the mother comes home from the police station.
Yes.
And she goes to throw that box away,
Right.
and the batteries fall out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that begins, and then that is like 3-4 minutes. I can't remember, but it is one build after another. The batteries fall out. Now, what does she do? She goes and she turns the doll over on its back, and she opens up the battery case. No batteries in, and the head does an Exorcist 180 turn. And it says, "Want to play?"
Yeah.
She drops the doll. The doll rolls under the couch. Can you think of anything worse than going and lifting up the couch in the dark space?
Right.
And the audience is screaming, "Don't look! Don't look!"
Go to Mexico.
She pulls the doll out. She can't get anything out of the doll. And finally, and this is going on now 3-4 minutes, she finally threatens to throw it in the fireplace.
Right.
And that's when the doll comes alive.
Right.
And finally you have the reveal in the doll. That's well after the first act break. The first act break is the babysitter going out the window.
Dinah Manoff from Greece.
Which once again, you have a master there. You have a master following her in a tighter close-up. You have a shot on her hands trying to grab onto the counter someplace to stop her from going back. You have her feet going back. And that, again, is echoing Hitchcock, where I must have 7, 8, 9, 10 shots before she goes out the window.
Right.
But they're all cut very quickly.
Yes,
Right.
but that's Hitchcock's influence as far as thrillers and working with visual set pieces that I learned by working on one film after another. And it is just as difficult now to create this, to write this, as it was then, because, well, one thing is, although you may have learned a lot of technique, you're also trapped by the past. we all want success, but trying to get rid of what made you successful in the past and trying to grow to something new is an extremely hard thing.
Stealing from yourself kind of thing.
Very, very, very hard to do. So, I mean, I'll go back to Stuart Stern's great comment again. Stuart said, well, you never lose talent. You never lose your talent, but it sure can hide for a while.
I'm still looking.
Classic.
And did you have an idea that like Child's Play was a hit? And
no, I knew Child's Play was going to be a hit. I knew it when I was shooting it.
And you had a talented group of people creating Chucky, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I had a lot of there was Kevin Yeager.
Right.
There was also Howard Berger was an assistant.
Yeah.
I mean, there was talent all over the place with those people.
And people, I think listeners too, if the younger listeners, they have to understand this is really before CGI, really. I mean, everything was practical. And I mean, you had several different Chucky puppets or things.
I must have had 25 different heads.
Yeah, exactly.
I've got.
Do you have any at home?
I've got a very sad story.
You don't have a single. You don't have a single Chucky at home.
I had the Chucky at home, and I also had a German Shepherd puppy.
Say no more.
And what we did was we stuck we stuck Chucky on the because it stood up.
Yeah.
We put it in the corner of the kitchen.
Yeah.
And the dog started to chew at it, and kept the puppy because he was teething. And finally, my wife said, "Get that goddamn ugly,
dog
gnawed thing out of here." And I threw it away, and that'd be worth $40,000 or $50,000.
You throw.
Now you know not to make Chucky out of rawhide.
That's like the dog ate my Chucky.
But what happened there was I had a great cast again.
Yeah,
Chris Sarandon back.
Yeah, right.
All great.
And the kid, Alex Vincent.
Alex Vincent was wonderful.
Totally believable, sympathetic.
And I love the whole idea that people are thinking he's psychotic. He's doing this stuff, which is great.
And Brad Dourif, the great Brad Dourif.
Yeah.
Well, but
what a voice.
But Brad came to me because I'd used him as the lead heavy in Fatal Beauty with Whoopi Goldberg.
Oh.
And that's why I cast him.
And he's gotten sequels full of voice work.
He's gotten a lot of work out of that thing.
Oh, my gosh.
That wasn't easy either because originally I thought that I should have an electronic voice. No, but I thought I should take the human voice and make it and put an electronic overlay over it. Because all the dolls sounded like that. And it didn't work. And then I tried thinking I thought, well, maybe it'd be more evil if I got a woman. And I had the gal in, a terrific actress, who did play Misty for me.
Well, and also what you do in Child's Play too is that there's kind of the two voices, right? There's the real Chucky voice, which is the kind of the toy voice.
The toy voice.
Mm-hmm. And then there's the Brad Dourif, which is such a great turn to go from that like playful kid voice to oh my God.
But when I came up with Charles Lee Ray, that's when the whole story fell into place. There was no antagonist. There was no bad guy. It was the kid making a blood buddy out of the doll, and then whenever the kid had a psychotic episode, the doll would go kill the dentist or the teacher.
So it was kind of like the kid doing it?
It was no fun.
Yeah.
And it was Charles from Charles Manson, Lee from Lee Harvey Oswald.
That's right.
Wow.
And James Earl Ray.
And Ray.
James Earl Ray.
James Earl Ray,
Jessica Walter.
Jessica
Walter.
And when I couldn't take and treat her voice electronically, I went back to Brad.
So you actually did recording with Jessica.
She came in and did voice work. Yeah,
okay.
I tried it.
Wow, interesting.
And I could never find an electronic overlay that worked.
Now let me ask you: did the dog chew those tapes?
No, but I mean, I can't think how much the damn thing would be worth now.
Wow, yeah.
But I mean, I have a picture up on my Facebook page right now that shows a good number of heads, and it must be damn near 20 heads.
Yeah,
because the doll's motion was limited. Mm-hmm. Its expression was limited.
Yeah,
and we were working with the animatronics. You're working
cables
with
stuff.
Cables.
Yeah.
And so in order to get a full range of motion, you had to change the head. Yeah. So it went from smiling to snarling to grinning but it could only take that expression and give a little bit of life to it.
Right.
Which is terrifying.
It is.
Right.
But actually,
because that's like a real toy.
Actually, you know what was the most terrifying for me, though, was when the doll catches fire. and is twitching. And I swear to God, Tom, I thought it was you little guy on fire.
I did. No, I did.
Did you?
I did.
I thought you put like a little machine or something in a little body.
Look at you stumbling into greatness.
Charred Chucky is the animatronic doll.
Okay.
But that movie is really me over. This sounds so conceited.
No.
Go for it.
Go for it.
But it's overcoming one technical hurdle after another, because no matter how hard Kevin worked, he could never do what was written in the script, and I didn't know at the time that I was writing things that were impossible. So I had seen Darby O'Gill and the Little People. Okay,
hey, terrifying.
No, you guys laugh. It's a good movie.
It's a cautionary tale.
It may be like Sean Connery's first movie.
I think so.
Yeah. But what they did there was they used forced perspective to put Connery next to the little person.
Yeah.
So what I did was I used forced perspective. I built oversized sets.
Oh, wow.
I used Ed Gale, who is a little person, and Ed Gale is the one that I burned in the fireplace.
No.
Yes.
Oh, and I have just one quick question. Okay, did you kind of pay an homage to Trilogy of Terror? Because I noticed when he's in the fire, she puts her back against the fireplace, similar to Karen Black with the oven. In I don't know, maybe that was subconscious. I just noticed that.
Okay. I didn't remember doing it, but I certainly sure as hell admired Trilogy of Terror.
And Dan
But so you had the little person in the fireplace, which means that the fireplace is 3 times its normal size.
Right.
I used him. Because you eventually have to have, hey, Ma, look, no wires.
Yeah.
I used the little person in the kitchen with the black voodoo doctor.
Right.
And so when Chucky's walking back and forth and threatening him and saying, I got to put my soul in the little boy before I'm trapped in here forever.
Yeah.
That's Ed Gale. And then there's some picture that I put up also on my Facebook page where you saw all these players, including Alex Vince's little sister. When you see the babysitter sitting there reading, and then behind the babysitter in the archway, out of focus, you see Charlie run by.
Right.
That is Alex Vincent's 5 or 6 or 4-year-old little sister.
No way.
Yes. And what I did was I put her in the costume and pinned her hair up. Didn't put a mask on her, but pinned her hair up. And her mother is hidden behind the archway on one side and the social worker on the other. And the little Alex's little sister runs out of focus behind the babysitter, and that's how I got the shot,
which scared me to death.
That's right. So what was going on was, whenever I encountered a problem, which I encountered a lot of, I would either cut to a moving point of view, I go to Ed Gale, I would go to the little sister. And whenever see what happens when the doll doesn't have full expressions, it forces a cut.
Yeah.
Because if you've got to go from moderately angry to murderously furious, but the face will only do moderately angry, you got to cut back to whoever, and then you cut back to Chucky with a new head on it.
Yeah.
And the technical problems were overwhelming for the puppeteers, and they did brilliant work.
Yeah.
Well, because I built the stage up.
Yeah.
I had the stage 4 feet off the ground.
Kind of like the Muppets, you know. They had
Well, the entire
Scary Muppets.
The entire apartment was built 4 feet off the ground on the soundstage.
Wow.
And then underneath it, you would have the puppeteers sitting with a television screen.
Wow.
And they would be watching the doll and trying to coordinate what it was doing with all the cables. And their image was reversed. I can't remember why, but in those days they couldn't do the television up here, and when it came through in the feed down under the set, it was reversed.
Right.
Interesting.
So you had the puppeteers were having to go left when they meant right.
Oh my gosh!
What a nightmare!
Yeah, and then of course I was burning through a lot of time.
Yeah,
and then I started getting terrible pressure from United Artists at that moment.
Really?
Now everybody that had given the go ahead the Child's Play had been fired. There was nobody left.
No,
it was Jerry Weintraub.
Oh my gosh!
Jerry Weintraub was head of UA for 5 minutes, gave the go ahead to the movie, and then was gone.
They were all having lunch with Michael Cimino.
And
it's like my entire career.
And then I had all these people who had no sympathy, didn't care, and it wasn't on their watch, and they wouldn't get credit, and they tried to just totally screw the picture.
But see, the film was like a huge success, and it spawned.
Classic.
I mean, it spawned like how many
sequels and everything, and
nobody knew that at the time.
No, of course.
Yeah.
So what happened was the pressure came down from the studio in the third act, and they said, "Cut Chucky." And I said, I said, no Chucky, no third act. I mean,
what did they envision? Just go a different set of characters? Like,
are you kidding me?
No.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Then I got in the fight with the guy who was the head of the production for 2 minutes, who kept saying, I've never done horror movies. I don't like them. I don't know anything about them. And he told me that I would either cut Chucky so I could bring it in cheaper, or I'd never work in Hollywood again. And I made the mistake of laughing in his face because it was such a cliche.
Yeah.
Yes.
And as far as I know, he's hated me for the rest of his life.
Wow. So you didn't throw out the Fright Night card. You said, "Hey, I did make Fright Night." You couldn't throw that in his face.
I don't think I've ever been like that.
Okay. I would have done that.
But hey,
I know.
But as credit to yourself, though, I mean, the movie turned out just great. The movie turned out great, and it was a commercial hit.
Yeah, that's right.
So
but I don't think I've ever come out of a picture more exhausted than I was at the end of it.
Sounds like it,
man.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because the technical problems of making the doll work were so overwhelming. But I mean, it was the same thing I did with Initiation of Sarah. Mm-hmm. I wrote things that could not yet be technically done.
Right.
But I had become...
You were ahead of your ahead of your time.
I'd become proficient enough technically that I could work around a lot of it.
Right.
And it's the same thing with Twisted Tales, where once again, I didn't have any money to speak of, and a lot of filmmaking is solving problems, and somehow, getting the dramatic intent on screen.
Right.
People will judge you for this or that, but I don't think anybody really realizes that every time you make a film, it's a different experience. Some of them, I don't know if they're ever easy. Certainly some of them are wonderful and a lot of fun, and others are just nightmares.
Yeah. Sure. It's like in Hollywood, I think it's a miracle any movie gets made and is,
It's true. Is any good.
Yeah. That has more than 5 people involved.
Yeah. Tom, can we talk a little bit about your work with Stephen King? Because there are very few directors who have adapted King more than once, like Mick Garris and Romero. And
I'll do one other quick story. In Cloak and Dagger, which is a film which I really like a lot.
Great movie.
We had Dabney Coleman for the father, and I wanted another actor, but I remember the head of the studio at that moment, it was Tom Mount, and I was in there with Richard, and we were pushing for the other actor, and Tom said, "You'll either do it with Dabney Coleman, or we won't make the movie. And furthermore, you'll never work in this lot again."
Wow.
Now I'll give you another quick story. I was over with Tony Perkins after Psycho 2 had become a huge success, and Tony was so pissed off about not getting his percentage and not getting any of his deferred payment that he sued the studio.
Really?
And the studio called him and told Tony he would never work again at Universal. This is Norman Bates you're talking to.
How can they get away with
This
that?
is Norman Bates after having a movie that you made for less than $5 million, which has made $95 million. And the studio calls and says, you've sued us because essentially we cheated the living shit out of you, for your money, and you're never going to work again.
Wow.
And Tony hung up the phone and he laughed. And I was there. He said, "Yeah, they won't work with me again until they need me." And sure enough, Psycho 3.
Right.
And he was so pissed off at the studio screwing him so badly on his money that he insisted on directing. And that's how Tony ended up directing Psycho 3.
I always wondered how that happened. I had no idea that's how it happened.
Because it was revenge on his part.
Yeah.
Wow.
Don't you love it when the good guys win?
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, see, these are the stories you very seldom hear.
We have to do a podcast entitled "You'll Never Work in This Town."
You'll never work.
And where are you hearing it? Here on Monster Party.
Okay, go back to Stephen King, whom I adore.
Because I mean, James Gonis is
he's Mr.
He is Mr. Stephen King.
Mr. Stephen King.
A constant reader.
Yeah.
Constant.
We all love him, but you have a special love.
James,
Yeah, I've read him for years, love his stuff, and love your adaptations. And
thank you.
Thinner, in particular, I love the book, and I thought that the adaptation was extremely faithful. And Joe Mantegna, in particular, as Richie Ginelli, was dream casting.
Great guy, right?
Yeah, he is. Absolutely.
I worked with him. I worked at this same theater with Al Pacino and got to be friends with him doing Glengarry Glen Ross.
Okay.
Couldn't have been nicer.
Were you talking about Chicago?
This was in San Francisco.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Couldn't have been a greater guy.
Well, Joe is. Yeah, Joe's just
salt of the earth. Just
he's
a lovely man.
He's really nice.
Yes, he is.
I know the word different.
Well, Joe came up to me one day and said, "Tom, I want to work with you again wherever you want." And I said, "Joe, that's lovely. What did I do that was so good?" He said, "It wasn't you." He said, "I made more residuals on Thinner than anything else." so we're blessed. I want to work with you again.
Honest man.
Thinner is like it's a tragic story, and it's like one bad turn after another. But the great thing about his character in it and him in it is that it's the first time that the main character takes a stand against the gypsies that put the curse on him. I read that there were different endings that the studio tampered with.
I think I made a terrible miscalculation. I think the film is absolutely wonderful up until the last 3 minutes.
Yeah.
The original ending I had on it, and the one that I prefer, and it's truer to the book, but it's a real bitter ending. This poor guy has gotten cursed by a gypsy, but he's been cursed because of his own moral weakness. His wife was giving him a blowjob in the car, and he ran down the gypsy king's wife.
Right.
And then, as opposed to taking his punishment, apologizing, whatever, however you give a pound of flesh to a vengeful gypsy, he uses his connections in town to get off. And for that, the gypsy king curses him, and he's obesely fat.
Yeah.
And finally, his dream comes true. He starts to lose weight, and then he can't stop. And then he realizes he's been cursed, and he has to get it lifted. But throughout the entire thing, he never takes responsibility for the original sin. So what happened in the direction, and because of John Burke, the terrific actor who played Billy, you start to sympathize with Billy, and you want Billy to win. And I should have been more clear when I wrote that script, which, by the way, I wrote that with Michael McDowell. And Michael McDowell is no longer with us, somebody else who was taken by AIDS. But Michael wrote, I think, an original script called Beetlejuice. And Michael was extraordinarily talented also, and he was a good friend of Clive Barker's. Anyway, I mean, it's just my whole the whole 80s and the 90s, I was losing everybody. Anyway, so what happens is Billy comes home, he gets the curse lifted, he comes home, and he realizes his wife is having an affair with the doctor.
Although it's a little ambiguous in the film.
Yeah, well, it shouldn't have been. That's my fault.
Okay.
I should have been very, very clear that the doctor was screwing his wife. And so Billy wants vengeance. Here we go back to infidelity again, jealousy.
Yeah.
And he has gotten the curse at this point lifted and into a cherry pie. So what he does, this is the original story. What he does is he gets up, before he goes to bed that night, he takes the cursed pie and he leaves it out because he knows his wife usually gets up early and she loves a piece of cherry pie. And so he's going to poison the bitch with the same curse that he had. So the following morning he gets up and he comes down and he looks down and there's the piece of pie and a piece has been eaten and he thinks, oh, wonderful, I've gotten my vengeance. And his 17-year-old daughter, the only person in the world that he loves, comes in and says, Dad, the pie was wonderful.
Oh.
And he realizes he's accidentally killed his daughter. Wow. And then in great despair, and because it's the only way he can save her, he eats a piece of the pie and takes the curse back onto himself.
Right.
Wow.
Okay.
Which is how the novel
The novel ends. Yeah. The audience hated the ending.
Really?
I mean, I have never seen in test. The audience stayed there through that film all the way into the last 3 minutes. And when Billy lost, they hated it. They wanted Billy to win.
Wow.
So I made a dramatic miscalculation, and I ended up with sort of this wink and a nod, quick out ending that wasn't as bitter and as black as the original ending.
I wonder if today's audience, if
maybe I could today. Maybe I could today. But back then, boy, they hated him losing.
Wow.
Well, the ending as it is does sort of work. It's not a complete.
No, it's sort of works, but it isn't the kick in the balls dramatic that I had.
Well, unless I'm missing something, I can't quite. What happens to Ginelli? Because in the book, he's killed by the gypsies.
I think he is killed in the movie.
In the movie, I must have overlooked that. Okay.
Yeah, I think he's killed in the movie.
Nice, James.
Yeah, way to go, buddy.
Effective,
way to go.
Very effective makeup effects by Greg Canham.
By Greg Canham, but Greg's extremely talented. He's won a couple of Academy Awards, but the one who designed it was Dick Smith.
And the granddaddy of all.
That's right.
Yes.
And Greg Cannon was his
like protege.
Was his protege. And that's not to take anything away from Greg. I had the pleasure of working with Dick because he was failing then too.
Yeah.
I've worked with John DeCure did Fright Night, designed Fright Night, and John DeCure Jr. He did Cleopatra. He did The King and I.
Yeah, great film.
It's just if you go look up John, your mouth falls open. Did Ghostbusters? He designed the whole thing, and that's who they gave me on Fright Night.
Most of your genre films you've had. As far as like special effects and people, we've had the greats.
I've had superlative people. I've had superlative actors, and I just had some luck in everything except maybe studio executives.
Which probably a lot of filmmakers say that.
Sometimes lucky, sometimes not.
Yeah, we don't blame you for that.
No.
The vicissitudes of work.
Yes.
Back to Stephen King. Stephen is our. He's ours Charles Dickens.
Right.
Yes.
And people don't remember because you really have to look at things in their historical perspective to get an idea. Stephen King made horror possible because he made it accessible for the middle class.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And until then, it was a very rarefied and looked down upon taste. I happen to have had it. I was reading Tales of the Crypt when I was about 7 or 8. Yeah. But what Stephen did is he broadened the genre. And when you look at what's going on now, where the genre is as vital as it is and is growing, a lot of credit has to be given to Stephen King, who made it accessible.
Totally.
He modernized it. He brought
mainstream,
day-to-day things like McDonald's.
That's right.
The protagonists were people we could relate to.
That's right.
People we knew.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'm very, very proud of Langoliers.
Yeah.
Because we did that again with no money.
Right.
Shooting with 16 millimeter in a live airport at Bangor International during the height of the summer holiday season.
Really?
Probably the greatest role that Bronson Pinchot had ever had.
He's great.
He is great. Yeah.
Talk about, like you said, about just relying on actors. That's quite an actor's piece. That film.
Yes.
Robert Morse.
Well, that's it.
Dean Stockwell.
Well,
awesome.
I could go on and on. Yeah, Robert Morris is a brilliant actor. He's not. I don't think he gets all the due that he should. Dean Stockwell. Well, Dean, I like to rehearse before I began, and I couldn't get Dean to rehearse. And it drove me nuts. And I said, "What is? You don't care anymore about acting?" No, he cared about golf.
There's some great courses up in Bangor.
So I had him for about half the time, but I had the rest of the cast. David Morris was more than happy to be there all the time. But what happened was that when I would shoot the ensemble scenes, where you'd have all 8 or 10 of them together. Mm-hmm. And then when I was in the editing room, I didn't notice it when I was shooting. And then I was in the editing room, and I started looking when I needed cutaways or I needed reaction shots.
Mm-hmm. And there's no Dean.
No. Dean was the one who was consistently working. Dean,
really?
when he had no lines, and he was listening in an ensemble cast. He knew that I was going to have to cut.
Right.
And you might have had a number of other actors who were saying, well, I can relax.
I can check out.
I don't have a cue line for 6 or 7 lines.
Right.
Not Dean Stockwell. He never stopped working the entire time.
That's awesome.
Once
It's a real
I said
actor.
action, even when he had no lines.
Right.
And so what he did is he drew the cut.
Right.
He drew the coverage.
He filled out the scene for all the other.
He drew the coverage to him again and again and again. And so that was a real pro who knew that I was going to have to do it. It's like working with William Forsythe. I did a Masters of Horror. We all scream for ice cream with William.
Yeah. And he's in one of the Twisted Tales as well.
Yes. I
love that one too.
And Danielle, you like that one?
Oh, Danielle is gorgeous and wonderful always.
Well, William knows coverage better than I do. I mean, William, literally, I'd be shooting a scene, and I was getting close to the end. William would walk up and say, "Excuse me, Tom," and tap me in the shoulder. But don't you need an over the shoulder on me?
Are you serious?
Oh yeah,
Classic.
oh yeah, and he was right.
Wow,
he was right. There was never a problem with ego with William. Mm-hmm. He just. Well, of course, he wanted his due, but I mean, technically, because he's been doing it for so long,
right.
He knew what the coverage should be, as well as the director.
That's great to have. Actors like
absolutely.
Just amazed by people.
Well, I'm just so amazed with your career and all the stuff that you've done and these incredible movies. And also, I'm really excited. Unlike these guys, I haven't seen the Tom Holland's Twisted Tales, but I can't wait to look at these. But the cool thing is we can expect more of these Twisted Tales in the future.
More Twisted Tales. I hope to be doing micro movies. I've got 10 o'clock people. I've got a wonderful script I wrote on that. It's now retitled Cessation. We've had it set up 3 times. Now, apparently, we're on our 4th time for having it set up.
And that's another Stephen King story.
Well, nice. I mean, it took 13 years to get Thinner done.
Wow, yeah.
But it took 13 years because it had a down ending.
Right.
Right.
Cessation should be easier. Knock on wood. So far, it's been very difficult, and that's because actors that mean something foreign keep coming in and dropping out. But hopefully, we'll get there.
Does your novel have a title?
I'm going to call it The Boy.
The Boy.
The Boy.
We will look out for that.
And you said it's thterrortime.com.
Well,
right?
the Untold Tales are there, and the Twisted Tales will be there pretty soon. And I've got all my scripts up, and I've got the Blu-rays to autograph.
Awesome.
And things like, I have Joe Renzetti doing the original score. I've got a limited edition of the score of Child's Play.
Awesome.
Signed by me and Joe. And mainly it's a fan collectible site, but I'd like to grow it and get fan art in there, and
sure,
I'd like to get some of the fan art on T-shirts too.
Sure.
Yeah. Anything we can do to help you with any of that.
I appreciate so much you giving me this forum.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you.
Tom.
Thanks so much for your time. That's been awesome.
This
has
been a treasure for
the fact that you have given us this much time. This is like the greatest film class I've ever been to.
And, I mean, just with your legacy and material that you've done, and also just your great knowledge of Hollywood history, and the fact that you're still moving forward with all this stuff now is just great. And like I said, we have always been fans of yours.
I can't wait. I can't wait to see this newer stuff that you've got. But I'm hoping maybe one day you'll come back, because I know you have a lot. I know you have a lot of other Hollywood stories I would love to hear. I'm sorry, I'm huge Hollywood
story fan. Free food, drinks.
Come on,
the best podcast ever.
Well, I've had a wonderful time. The questions have been very, very intelligent, if not brilliant, and you've been wonderful company.
Wow.
Hey, it's the Monster Party.
No, you've made it fun. You've made it fun.
That's the Monster Party.
Yeah,
that's what we do.
Yeah. And I hope everybody out there enjoyed this, and I hope you keep listening to Monster Party, because these guys are great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just a reminder to our listeners, you can find us on Twitter at Monster Party HQ, and on Facebook and YouTube at Monster Party TV. And if you're listening to us on iTunes, please take a moment and write a review. We would love to hear your thoughts.
Oh, and we got to say, This episode is the first one under the banner of the Fangoria Podcast Network.
Yeah,
you heard us.
So awesome.
You heard us, world.
They love
did.
Fangoria.
Bask in our power.
Absolutely.
On that note, I am Matt Weinhold.
I am Shawn Sheridan.
I'm Larry Strothe.
And I'm James Gonis.
And I'm Tom Holland.
Yeah.
And I'm on Twitter, too.
All right.
Yes, you are.
And on that note, I just want to say, keep America strong.
Watch, read, listen to anything that Tom Holland has his name on.
Yeah.
God bless. Thank you. Thank you.
Woo! Yeah!
Oh, what a great show!
That was a great show.